of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Let's be honest. Wheelchairs are heavy, bulky, and ugly. If you carry a wheelchair in your car to take care of a loved one, you know how hard it is getting that clunky, old-style wheelchair in and out of your car. Introducing the Feather Chair Wheelchair. At 13 pounds, it's the world's lightest wheelchair. It folds in seconds and fits neatly in your trunk, backseat, or closet, so you can take it everywhere. And it's only available right here. Order yours today and get a free wheelchair case, a $50 value, yours free. The Feather Chair. The world's lightest wheelchair is just $4.99 with easy payments as low as $16 a month. Sorry, no Medicare or insurance accepted. So call right now to order yours.
800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. 800-823-5826. That's 800-823-5826.
And the guys who were available, well, if you saw on social media how they were talking about Deron Bland, you kind of have an idea of how that went. So, the passing game was a big issue for the Cowboys defense. Moving on, some other significant stats that were pointed out by Next Gen Stats. We have that Dak Prescott has passed for at least 260 yards 4 times this season, twice in his last 3 games, while averaging. Oh, wait, this is from before the game. My apologies. That's not the stat that I was looking for. Oh, there was a Dak Prescott stat that I was looking for. I'm going to find that in a second. But while I'm looking for that, I actually want to go into what's going to end up being the burn book of the week. So this is something that I started last week with Matt Eberflus because I felt it was time that we address Matt Eberflus and what was going on with his defense. And this week, I'm actually finding myself addressing someone that I didn't think I would have to address this entire season. Why? Because the offense was looking phenomenal. Statistically and via the eye test, it was looking like the best offense in the league. Like almost nobody was arguing that. However, because of the trends of the past couple of weeks and because of this person's responsibility for the team as a whole, I just felt like it's time for me to go ahead and say something about this person. So I present to you the burn book of the week, and I'll announce it after the intro.
You let it out, honey. Put it in the book.
And yes, the burn book entry of the week goes to one Mr. Brian Schottenheimer. And that is actually for several reasons, and maybe not for the reasons that you think. So Brian Schottenheimer And I will say this, I'm not one of the people who's calling for his job. I'm not one of the people who's saying he should be on the hot seat, he should be fired. There's a lot to discuss when it comes to that, but I'm not really quite there yet. But I do feel like he deserves some criticism this week. I do feel like we're at a point where it's time to at least start talking about Brian Schottenheimer, and not for the reasons that you might think. I know there are a lot of people who are like, really stuck on that first drive, the first offensive drive by the Cowboys, where they made it all the way deep into the red zone. Weren't able to get a touchdown on their first 3 attempts, and then they got the 4th down where they had the opportunity to go ahead and put points on the board to start the game, and they ended up bypassing the field goal to go for it and try to get a touchdown. And a lot of people were upset with his decision to go for it on 4th down there, saying that he should have gone for the points. But here's why I'm not mad at that decision. Here's why I'm not mad about that. They knew going into this game that they would need to be aggressive. And he talked about that a lot in his press conference. And I feel like that's one of the things in his press conference that was not simply coach speak. That was one of the few things that was actually sincere. It was important for them to be aggressive because what they needed to do was actually set the tone for the game. They needed to be able to rely on their run game. And what that meant was they needed to be in a position to where they could play the game at the pace that they desired. They needed to play from ahead. They needed to play from ahead so that they would be comfortable playing against, but what, according to like all observations, like if you put the record aside, if you don't think about the fact that they were on a losing streak, if you don't think about the fact that they were that they were 2-5, you're looking at an Arizona Cardinals team that has a good defense and an offense that had been trending upward under the leadership and management of Jacoby Brissett, right? So the Cowboys needed to get ahead quickly, establish the run game, and then basically dictate the pace for the rest of the game. And going for it, especially if they had scored there, would have put them in a position to do that. Now, here's the thing. Let's think about what would have happened had they attempted the field goal, made the field goal, and got 3 points. What then would have happened is the Cardinals would have started their next drive in better field position. And I'm of the opinion that had that happened, they would have ended up scoring a touchdown on that first drive instead of a field goal themselves. Because one of the things that we saw throughout the game was that the defense was not able to get the Cardinals off the field. And I feel like that first possession by the Cardinals, the reason why they were able to hold them to a field goal was because the Cardinals started from so deep in their own territory. So while a lot of people didn't like that decision, I actually think in that situation, it was a better decision to make. I do think it kept the Cardinals from putting as many points on the board as they could have. However, there are several things that you have to consider in that situation, which is the main one in that specific situation is that if you're going to decide to be aggressive there, you have to have a plan for what you're going to do with that aggression. Be aggressive is not a strategy. That's just a mindset. That's just like a cultural label, if you will. What you actually need in that situation is like, okay, we're going to be aggressive doing what? And unfortunately, the Cowboys' red zone offense has been trending downwards. And I feel like for the people who are upset that they went for it and didn't just go ahead and take the field goal, that's what they were saying that made them say, okay, this was not a good decision. So while statistically, and if you go by the analytics that everybody's so obsessed with now, yes, it did look like it was a good decision to go for it on that 4th down. I think a lot of people were looking at it like, okay, you don't really have a lot of options for how to be successful here. In the past, when you've gotten to this point, we've been able to rely on Javonte Williams, and it seems like teams are watching film. They figured out how to snuff that out, and you haven't really planned anything else that looks like it's even going to be remotely successful in this situation. So just take the points. I even said on my broadcast, I said the Cowboys seem to have a better chance of being further away from the goal line and actually making an explosive play, maybe not against this defense, but making an explosive play and getting a touchdown. It seems like they're better at that than actually being in the red zone and trying for a touchdown from there. For whatever reason, the red zone offense has just not been doing what it needs to do. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like for a lot of people who were really, really upset about that decision, that's why they were upset. So that part I get. But even that is not the main reason why I'm upset with and disappointed with Brian Schottenheimer. That's not the thing that really got me. So for me, not that specific situation, but one of the things is the fact that the red zone production overall has been trending downward. And whether they had taken the field goal or not, that's something that came into play during this game. And that's something that's been coming into play in several situations over the past few weeks. And so it's like you kind of had a little bit of cushion, a little bit of time to deal with this and to address this, Brian Schottenheimer. However, you don't seem to have come up with any answers. And not only did you not come up with any answers for the red zone, like what was working overall offensively, you ended up abandoning that. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about the fact that you abandoned the run. So, for the Dallas Cowboys, when it came to run attempts, there were only 15 by Javonte Williams. And this was definitely a game where people were looking at this like, okay, against this team, you're going to want to run 20, 25, maybe even 30 carries by Javonte Williams. We knew that we were going to have to rely on Javonte Williams. So, that was definitely already on the table because Blue just, for whatever reason, hadn't proved himself to be consistent enough over the past couple of games. So this was a game where people knew, hey, we're going to have to establish the run. We're going to have to rely on the run. And that was working initially. Javonte Williams was getting some good runs off, and then you abandoned it. Why? Because the opposing team extended their lead? Like, I feel like if you're going to abandon the run, if you're going to switch things up like that, you got to have a plan for how you're going to handle it after that. And you just didn't have a plan because what we saw was, okay, the run was working. The run was helping. We know even in past games, the run has been a very integral part of why the offense has been successful. That's why the play action has been so successful. That's why the offense has been so successful because of the Cowboys' ability to marry the run and the pass. So you can't just abandon the run and feel like you're going to have any success. I don't care what the opposing team is doing. I know some people say like, okay, well, when the opposing team gets a big lead, you have to pass more. That's not really something that you can rely on, especially because of this next thing that I'm about to mention that So there were issues with protections and not just the O-line. We're talking about the O-line as well as just the pass blocking in general. It just seemed like the team all around was unprepared to protect Dak Prescott. So whatever it is that they seem to want to do by abandoning the run, it didn't really lend itself to something that worked out any better. So it's like if your thought process was, okay, if we abandon the run, we're going to then move into this other option. We're then going to take advantage of XYZ. There was nothing for them to take advantage of, right? So abandoned the run and then didn't have the protections necessary to rely on anything else in the offense, right? So it wasn't like there was, we're going to change the pace in such a way. Like there was nothing like that. They went into quick game, or no, they didn't have any like heavier sets or like max protect looks in order to rely on. They didn't have any options there. And then on top of that, you had discipline issues. Now, luckily, this was a game that this didn't lead to a lot of first downs for the opposing team, as it has in the past. But if you look at, once again, the statistics in the situation, it looks like a game where the refs were definitely okay with not calling a lot of penalties. The Cardinals only had 2 penalties, but the Cowboys ended up with 6. How do you end up with 3 times more penalties than your opponents? And this is, once again, a lot of pre-snap stuff. So not all of it was, and Brian Schottenheimer will probably mention that in the press conference that he's holding right now. But this was a situation where you weren't in a position to be able to afford any of it. So while 55 yards doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot compared to what's happened with the Cowboys in the past, it's still a situation where it's like you definitely needed those situations to not be drive killers. Because how many times did we have like holding penalties that ended up negating what was a good catch? And this was a game where they definitely couldn't afford to have any good catches called back because you had dudes dropping passes, fumbling the ball, so on and so forth. And so there were a couple of times where you did have a good catch or a good play that could have really shifted the momentum in the favor of the Cowboys. However, penalties, discipline issues canceled that out. And so that is, when it comes to discipline, when it comes to culture, those are things that I put on the head coach as well. And then just in general, in some ways, what we do see from the defense, while we do look at Brian Schottenheimer as an offensive coach, I do have to put that at least partially on Brian Schottenheimer, just because of the fact that you are the head coach. When we see that something is repeatedly not working, that something is repeatedly failing, I feel like at some point you have to deal with what's happening on the defensive side of the ball. And we've heard that he's been going into the meetings, that he's been talking to them. Okay, that's cool. But if you are physically present, if you're there, if you're having the conversations that need to be had, why does it seem like the defense is repeatedly resorting to things that are simply not working, that are just simply making the defense look worse than it needs to look? I'm not the only person who's called out the fact that there are players on the Dallas Cowboys defense that look worse than they've ever looked before, and that the scheme doesn't lend itself to their strengths, and that the zone, that the way they're playing it just simply is not working. I could go on and on. However, they seem to keep resorting to things that are not working, and that the first week you can put it on the defensive coordinator. The second week you might be able to put it on the defensive coordinator. You can talk about buy-in. You can talk about players not adjusting, whatever you want to talk about. But once you get to week 9 and you're seeing a lot of the same issues and over again, at some point you have to look at the head coach and be like, okay, what are you doing about this? Why is it that we're seeing the same issues repeatedly? And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be getting fixed. It doesn't seem to be improving. It doesn't seem to be getting better. So those are all my reasons why I feel like, even though overall I do feel like Brian Schottenheimer is doing the best he can in a bad situation, it's time to discuss what his role is in all of this and what his role is in the team as a whole looking the worst it's looked all season. And it's time to discuss, just what could be at stake if he doesn't change something about the way he's coaching the team. Now, I say all this, and Brian Schottenheimer is literally doing a press conference right now. So I don't know what he might be talking about, what he might be taking responsibility for. He's probably answering a lot of questions about the trades that happened today, if we're being honest. So I'll read that, and it's one of the things that we'll definitely get into later this week and just talk about some of what he's saying. So normally I would look at what's going on in the chat right now. It looks like there's nothing that's happening in the chat quite yet. Let me see if I can take a look at the time that we have remaining. Okay, looks like about 6 minutes. Okay, so what we're going to get into after the break is we're going to talk about some of the trades that have happened today. There are 2 major ones for the Cowboys. I don't think we're going to get into what's going on in the NFC East as a whole, although, of course, as predicted, the Eagles have made some significant trades. But for the Cowboys, they have acquired a linebacker, Logan Wilson from the Bengals. They acquired him for a 7th-round pick, so a lot of people are kind of like, hey, we don't know what he's really going to bring to the Cowboys, mainly just because a couple of seasons ago, he was a really good linebacker from the Bengals. But this season, he hasn't even started from them, and there's been a little bit of a debate about why that is. There are some people who are pointing to the fact that the Bengals have one of the worst defenses in the league, and they're like, okay, so he's supposed to be good, but for whatever reason, he can't even get a starting position with the Bengals. So there are some people who are pointing to that as an issue. And then there are also people who are saying, well, he just doesn't have a good relationship with the defensive coordinator there right now. So also valid. So I'm going to tell you guys what I've heard from certain people who are in the know, and we're going to talk about what this could mean for the Cowboys. But then the blockbuster trade of the day for the Dallas Cowboys is the acquisition of defensive tackle Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets. And that's the one that a lot of people are super excited about, just because this is the move that they're looking at as possibly being the move that could actually make a difference for the defense. And so I'm definitely excited about it, but I'm also hesitant. I think I'm hesitant just to get too excited about it because there are some people who are like, "Oh, this could really change the way the rest of the season's going to go. This could be the thing that gets the Cowboys back on track." I don't know if I'm quite ready to say all that. Am I excited that the Cowboys are making a move like this? Absolutely. This was something I did not like. I honestly thought Logan Wilson was going to be it. I thought that was going to be it. I thought they were going to be like, "Oh, we got this linebacker who should be a better fit." Cool. And that was just going to be it in terms of what we saw from the Cowboys. And so this whole Quinnen Williams situation coming down the pipeline is actually really shocking. But if you look at some of the other moves the Jets made, I think a lot of it has to do with it just kind of feels like the Jets are throwing up their hands and saying, "All right, we need to start over. We need to rebuild. We need the picks. So some of these good players that we have, we're going to let them go to other teams where hopefully they have bright and promising careers and futures." So, yeah, best of luck to them. And so part of it is just because of the New York Jets. They just happen to be in a position where they're offloading some of their best players. Quinnen Williams happened to be one of those best players. And the Dallas Cowboys has a surplus of picks to give away. So props to them. But no, I am not ready to say that Quinnen Williams is going to be a difference maker in that sense. In the sense that I'm ready to say that, okay, this is going to be the move that gets the Cowboys possibly in postseason discussions. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But yeah, we're going to talk a lot more about that in detail after the break. And then we're going to talk about the updates or non-updates with the WNBA coverage and just them and their attempts to come to a deal with the CBA negotiations between the players and the WNBA executives. So spoiler alert, they haven't really gotten anywhere. They didn't end up staging the lockout though. So, I mean, that is, I guess you could call that a win for both parties because that wouldn't have been good for either side if they had to do the lockout. So at least they did both agree to an extension, but there are some quotes out that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what that means. We're going to talk about what the trades mean for the Dallas Cowboys. And that's pretty much it. There's a lot going on in the world of Dallas sports that we're going to get into in later episodes. So if you heard about the NHL commissioner kind of coming at the Dallas Mavericks sideways, that's happening. But a lot of people are coming at the Dallas Mavericks sideways because they have not been doing well themselves in the court. But let's go ahead and get into this break, and we'll come back and talk about all of that right after this.
If you are trying to quit drinking or doing too many drugs, listen to me. You don't know me and we'll never meet. I had a problem like you once. I drank and used to party a little too much till it got out of control and almost ruined my life. I realized I needed help to fix my problem before it totally destroyed me. If you've tried to fix your drinking and drug problem and you know you can't do it alone, you need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581.
Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message, a company logo, or a custom design, Romika Laser Engraving will help you make your mark. And the best part, our prices are affordable and our turnaround time is quick.
I couldn't be happier with the work Romika Laser Engraving did for me. The engraving on my product was precise and exactly what I wanted.
So don't wait any longer to add a personal touch to your products. Call Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs today at 817-400-4040 or visit our website at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
What's up? And we are back. And yes, I'm frozen, but if you can hear me, we're going to keep going with the show. So no worries there. All right. So if you're watching, if you joined during the break and you are in a place to share your thoughts in the chat, go ahead and share your thoughts about where the Cowboys are right now, just in terms of the win-loss record. For anyone who needs an update, they are 3-5-1. As well as how you feel about the odds of them coming back and making the playoffs, and what you think about the moves that have been made in order for the team to hopefully do something for the rest of the season. You know, they've made a couple of big trades today for Logan Wilson and for Quinnen Williams. Well, I guess they made a couple of trades and one big trade today. I'm not going to call the Logan Wilson a big trade, although it could end up being something that works out really well for the Cowboys. It's definitely not a big one now. That one's a wait and see. But we're going to talk about that later in this segment because it is time for Read and React. So this is a segment where we read things and then we react to them. It's exactly what it sounds like. So before we get back into what's going on with the Cowboys, we're going to do a little bit of read and react involving the WNBA. So the WNBA is at a point where they need to decide on a new CBA. The WNBA players are not happy with the CBA that they have in place. They opted out earlier this year, thinking that by the time the most recent one expired, that they would be in a position to have a better deal in place. That did not happen. So that deal expired at the end of October. We are now 4 days into November, and luckily for everyone involved, both sides did agree to an extension. So basically, it's a 30-day extension so that they can continue negotiations. Now, technically, they can agree to extension after extension if they really want to. I doubt that'll happen. I feel like they'll reach an agreement or a lockout at some point before that. But right now, they're in the middle of, or at the beginning of a 30-day extension, I should say. And so that's what they're dealing with right now. So the first portion of this Read and React comes from a story published by ESPN that goes on to describe what's going to happen now. So they said the agreement signals that both parties want to continue negotiations in hopes of reaching a deal soon. During the past CBA talks in 2019, the WNBA and the WNBPA and the WNBA agreed to a 60-day extension before a new deal was ultimately ratified in January of 2020. But that time, there wasn't a major time crunch as they're in now, needing to fit in a 2-team expansion draft and a massive free agency period in which nearly all the league's veterans are seeking new deals before the 2026 season would likely begin in May. Though both sides met multiple times last week for bargaining ahead of the deadline, it's not yet clear how often they will meet during the next 30 days. So typically those meetings include WNBA and NBA staff, plus their outside counsel, as well as WNBPA staff and its outside counsel. So that basically means all the parties involved and their lawyers. And then there's potentially union advisors and player leadership. So that's a lot of people who have to get on the same page schedule-wise in order to figure out what's going to happen next. So next logical question is, what happens if there's no deal at the end of 30 days? Well, another extension is always possible, although the WNBA has a lot to fit into this offseason. This is according to ESPN. And even if the deal expires, a work stoppage would not automatically follow. There doesn't technically need to be an extension for both sides to continue bargaining. Instead, they'd enter a phase called quote-unquote status quo, in which the working conditions of the current CBA would remain in place. The problem is, if there isn't an extension, it would open the door for a potential work stoppage, either a strike initiated by the players or a lockout initiated by the owners. So far, this isn't an overwhelming concern. Even before the extension was announced, sources league-wide said they did not believe a work stoppage was imminent. So that's where they are in terms of what's happening now and what could happen next. The next interesting thing that we're going to read and react to is this story that I actually found in CBS Sports. And so it's called The WNBA CBA Showdown, The Case for Optimism in the Most Important Labor Negotiations in Women's Sports History. That's a hell of a headline, y'all. I read that and I was like, okay, where's the optimism coming from? What do you know that the rest of us don't know? Lindsay Gibbs, who wrote this story. And then also, I was wondering if they made a case for it to be the most important labor negotiation in women's sports history. People have talked about it that way, and it's mainly come from the fact that right now women's basketball is in the best position out of any women's sport to really take what would be considered by most a significant percentage of revenue. So in most women's sports, women end up getting a really small percentage of the revenue. And unfortunately, it points to the mindset of a lot of the executives and owners and how little they're willing to risk in terms of investing into women and women's sports. And yes, both are significant because we're not just talking about the sport as a spectacle. We're also talking about investing in the women themselves. And a lot of people speculate that part of the hesitation to do that comes from the fact that these are women. And in the case of the WNBA, you're talking about not only women, you're talking about a sport that is made up of a lot of both Black and queer women. And that's something that has impacted them in terms of sponsorship, in terms of viewership, in terms of fandom, so on and so forth. So there has been speculation that all those things contribute into the hesitation to pay the players what it seems like they should be owed based on the growth of the league and of the sport, right? So this particular article, when we get to the section where it talks about what there is to be optimistic about, it says this. My optimism remains because for perhaps the first time in women's team sports history, there's enough money in the pool to make all parties happy. And, sorry, ads make the words on pages jump around and it's really annoying. And enough momentum to provide motivation to make uncomfortable moves in the short term to set the stage for more riches for everyone in the long run. WNBA revenue hasn't just increased in the past few years, it has exploded. The league just signed an 11-year, $2.2 billion television deal with supplemental broadcast deals still to come. Mark Davis bought the Las Vegas Aces for $2 million in 2021. 4 years and 3 championships later, the Aces are valued upwards of $300 million. Owners of the 3 most recently announced expansion teams, Cleveland, Detroit, and Philadelphia, ponied up $250 million in expansion fees each. And Sportico reports that the Golden State Valkyries, who just completed their inaugural season, are already worth $500 million and should make about $70 million in revenue this year. The 2025 season smashed attendance records and saw ratings soar. The business is healthy and shows no signs of slowing down. So women's sports have historically been with kids' glove by investors and owners with operating structures created to minimize losses and prioritize stability above all else. So that kind of goes to what I was talking about a second ago about how they just aren't willing to take on as much risk as they are with men's sports. So since women's team sports are so new in the professional marketplace compared to their men's counterparts and face layers upon layers of systemic sexism in media, advertising, fandom, and business, the conservative approach was somewhat understandable. Now, I'm going to add a caveat to that. It's understandable, but in my opinion, not acceptable. Because yes, it's new, but I feel like once you have sports prove themselves, especially in the way that women's basketball has, then still not taking on as much risk as you would for a men's sport is not acceptable at that point. When the WNBA was young and it wasn't proven and we didn't really have a model in place or examples in place about how it could grow and what was attracting viewers, it's like, okay, I get it. We haven't really figured out what works in terms of marketing. We haven't really figured out the patterns of this particular fan base. But those things are no longer in question the way that they were before. So now I'm kind of like, okay, what's the excuse now? You know what I'm saying? So the article goes on to say, but when you let the worst case scenario dictate every decision, which is what they're doing, you put a cap on the best case scenario. It's a testament to the players that the league has grown as much as it has despite this limiting governance. With this next CBA, players are asking the league to take the training wheels off. It's going to take a mindset shift from owners and most likely some compromises from the players to help grease the wheels. But there's too much money to be made by all parties for good sense not to prevail. So I'm going to react to that before I read one more thing. And my reaction actually is partially a callback to what Adam Silver said a couple of weeks ago. And it was, for the most part, a benign statement. For the most part, it was. All he was really saying was that he felt like relationships needed to be fixed, and he wasn't really worried about the threat of the players walking out, right? But it was the certainty with which he said it that bothered me because it was almost dismissive of the concerns that the players were bringing up at the time. And to me, it felt like in order to have that much certainty as someone who's the NBA commissioner, you only have a role in the WNBA because of the fact that the NBA has subsidized the WNBA for so long. To me, it was almost saying that they didn't have anything to worry about because at the end of the day, they felt like they held all the cards. But I'm just like, that's not really treating these players as human beings. You're taking a lot of things for granted when you do that. And it's almost like you're just assuming like, hey, they're either going to take what we offer them or they're going to get nothing. And I just feel like that's the wrong way to approach this entire situation. So adding some numbers to what I'm saying, here's some more information from the same article on CBSSports.com. It says, the crux of the dispute is over revenue sharing. The WNBA does want to give the players a significant raise, and it's proposed a deal with a max salary of $850,000 up from $250,000 and a minimum salary of $300,000 up from $80,000. But the league wants to keep the current framework in place, which is a fixed salary cap that increases by a predetermined percentage per year. The players want a model more similar to the one in the NBA, where salary caps are directly tied to a percentage of basketball-related income. This would allow them to reap the benefits of the WNBA's growth in real time. In the NBA, the players receive about 50% of basketball-related income. It's unlikely that WNBA players will be able to achieve a 50% split, but right now, WNBA salaries only account for approximately 9% of basketball-related income. And so these are two fundamentally different ways at looking at compensation and growth. And it's undoubtedly worrisome that the two sides are still approaching negotiations in such disparate ways this late into the process. So my whole thing is this. I've said this before and I've said it again. 9% is crazy. So I feel like while the WNBA has made its case for not giving them 50%, to keep them stuck at 9% considering the growth of the sport, that is not only bananas, it's disrespectful. And so I feel like somewhere between 9% and 50%, there's got to be some middle ground that gives the WNBA players the raises that you've promised anyway, but also lets them benefit from the growth of the sport, because the revenue that you're getting, that money is going somewhere. Like when you have a sport that's grown this much, that money is it's going somewhere. So why would you have so many people benefiting from the growth that the players have contributed so much to, but the players don't? Because the numbers that the WNBA is recommending, while those numbers are higher, it actually leads to a smaller percentage of revenue if you go by percentage. And so the players are saying, like, no, like if everything's growing, we want our percentage to grow as well. And that's fair. It makes sense. And adopting that mindset would mean respecting these players as players and giving them what they deserve for the part that they've played in the growth of the sport. And I feel like to approach it any other way is sending a signal to the players that they don't matter. And if you're going to do that, fans are going to start asking why. Is it because they're women? Is it because of their race? Is it because of their sexual orientation? Why? What reason do you have? Because it's not because they're not performing. It's not because the sport isn't doing well. It's not because eyes aren't on them. It's not because fans aren't doing their part. So when you have people saying you don't value players, when you have people saying, hey, we think it might be because of some of these discriminatory and biased things, you're not really giving them much reason to think otherwise. So that's that. I'll definitely keep an eye on this. Not too many actual quotes have been coming out, but there's supposedly something going on behind the scenes that should get them in a place to where they can agree on something before these expansion drafts take place. So shout out to the players. All right. So the next portion of our Read and React segment, we're going to talk about Logan Wilson. So, for the trades, we're going to talk about, or we're going to read and react to what has been said on ESPN. So Todd Archer, if you listen to the press conferences that happen with the Cowboys, Todd Archer is one of the ones who's always asking a lot of questions, who Brian Schottenheimer seems to really like. But he wrote about the trade for Logan Wilson. And so he said this. He said, Jones hinted that the Cowboys might not be done dealing ahead of Tuesday's 4 p.m. Eastern trade deadline, although he did not specify a position that Dallas was targeting. It goes on to say about Wilson himself. Wilson, 29, has 2 years remaining on a 4-year, $36 million extension he signed in July 2023. He registered at least 100 tackles each of the past 4 seasons, but has seen reduced playing time this season with the Bengals. So I'm going to pause right there. I've asked a couple of people about this reduced playing time just to make sure that I'm working with real information and not necessarily just rumors. And pretty much everybody I've talked to has said this is not because of his capabilities as a player. They've said that this is because of his relationship with the current defensive coordinator. One person actually said that Logan Wilson actually requested a trade, and that's what put a strain on his relationship with the defensive coordinator to the point where he's seen reduced playing time. And so they're saying it's not about him not being capable. It's not about him no longer being a good player. This is really all politics. So everybody I've asked says, yeah, he's still a good player. He's still doing his thing, but because he doesn't have a good relationship with this coordinator, he's not getting playing time. So don't take that as a sign that he's no longer good. So Bengals coach Zach Taylor said in a statement, I appreciate everything Logan has done as a player and as a person during his time in Cincinnati. He has been a central part of our defense over the past 6 years, and he will be remembered as a leader in our locker room. I wish him the best moving forward. So in my opinion, that's a glowing, I don't want to say what's not recommendation. It's a glowing compliment from a respected coach. Didn't get any statement from the defensive coordinator, but at least we've heard some good things from the coach. So Todd Archer goes on to say the Cowboys are 31st in the NFL in total defense. Who's 32nd now? Damn. They're allowing 397.4 yards per game and scoring defense, allowing 30.8 points per game, ahead of only the Bengals in both categories. Okay, so the Bengals are 32nd. That answers that. So when y'all see people who are not really feeling good about this trade, that's a big part of the reason why. It's that we're taking a player from the 32nd defense in the league and putting him on the 31st ranked defense in the league and saying, okay, go out there and make a difference. So here's my thing. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your ass and act like, oh, I feel so good about this trade. They gave up a 7th-round pick for him. So this is very much a wait and see thing for me, especially when it comes to just the disorganization in the linebacker corps in general. Like, the linebacker corps has some good players and they've got some not so good players. But overall, even when you look at what the linebacker corps does consistently, you can tell that all the missteps of the linebackers are not due to just what players are doing. Some of this is a scheme and some of this is what they're being coached to do. And so that's why even with bringing in a linebacker that's supposed to be good, I'm still kind of like, okay, I need to wait and see how this actually plays out. I need to wait and see what actually happens here and how this ends up impacting the team before I just say whether I'm good with this trade or not. I'm just glad that they didn't give up a lot for him. So I'm like, good job there. I'm I'm not mad at the fact that they're bringing in another linebacker because they were thin at the spot. Regardless of what you think of who's there, regardless of how you feel about Kenneth Murray or Jack Sanborn, who's going to be out for a little while anyway, but regardless of what you feel about any of those guys, they were thin at that spot. They needed somebody. Now, what I'm concerned about is how this will impact the confusion because, like I've said, they don't seem to really know what they want to do with the guys who are there. Especially when it comes to Maris Luafau. They don't seem to know what to do with him, which I'm really disappointed in because I feel like you're wasting good potential. Maris Luafau, I know some people are saying he's good, some people are saying he's bad. He was a 3rd-round pick. It's not like he was a 1st-round pick who was supposed to come in and make like just this big splash in the NFL. He was a 3-star recruit. He was a 3rd-round pick, but the Cowboys had the potential to do a lot with him if they used him in the right way and helped him develop in the right way, which they have not been doing this season. And we'll talk more about that probably tomorrow night when I talk about whatever Brian Schottenheimer is currently saying in his press conference. So when you're bringing in more linebackers, I start to worry, like, what is your plan? What does this mean for Maris and Shamar and Demo? So that's what I'm going to be watching. I'm supposed to be a trenches girl this year, y'all. I'm supposed to be watching what's happening in the trenches. But this Matt Eberflus scheme has got me completely obsessed with the second level and what's happening with the linebackers and what's happening with my favorite players. Anyway, second part of this read and react regarding the Cowboys trades is related to what ESPN has to say about the trade for Quinnen Williams. Now, this is the one that everybody is really excited about, and we should be. There's been a lot of people who have been calling for defensive tackle help, and so a lot of people are satisfied by that. There's also been a lot of people calling for the team to get rid of Mozzie Smith, and so both those groups are satisfied by that. And then there's also the fact that for various reasons, people think that this might lead to the implementation of an odd man front. Now, if you've been watching along, you know that one of the things that Matt Eberflus has been doing, he has been experimenting with an odd man front. Mozzie Smith has been a part of that. So maybe part of the reason why they haven't been more consistent with that is because of Mozzie Smith. And now that they're, getting rid of Mozzie Smith and bringing in Quinnen Williams, maybe they'll do that a little bit more. Because I will say some of the best moments for the Cowboys defense literally have been in those odd man front situations. You know what I'm saying? And for me, that's why I even noticed. I was like, wait, hold up. What is this? This is different. Oh, we're doing something different. We're getting different results. Wow, look at that. And those odd man fronts are not only just the 3-4 situation that a lot of people are looking for. So what's anticipated is that it'll be Osa, Quinnen Williams, and Kenny Clark as your 3 defensive tackles. That would be a dream. I love it. But also bringing down Maris Luafau as a stand-up edge and usually having somebody else on the other edge. So you've got that 3-4 defense, but then you've got those 2 guys on the outside. So you've got 5 guys either on or near the line of scrimmage. And that's been really effective for the Cowboys. It's helping them be more effective with pressure. You can kind of tell it impacts the quarterbacks a little bit more. So, yeah, if that's the plan here, I'm excited to see it. I can't wait to see it. But this is what Tard Archer said. He says, the Cowboys had discussions with the Jets regarding Williams and a potential trade for Micah Parsons before the season started, but they were told New York did not have the resources to sign Parsons to a mega contract. 2 months later, the Cowboys have Kenny Clark, who was acquired from the Green Bay Packers, along with 2 first-round picks for Parsons, and Williams at defensive tackle, along with Oso Digizua, who was signed to an $80 million contract in March. Hours before the deal for Williams, the Jets traded star cornerback Sauce Gardner to the Indianapolis Colts for 2026 and 2027 first-round selections and receiver A.D. Mitchell. Williams, 28, was the 3rd overall pick in the 2019 draft and was selected to the Pro Bowl for 21 through 2023 seasons, which included time with current Cowboys defensive line coach Aaron Whitecotton. So there's some familiarity there. For his career, he has 40 sacks, and this season has been credited with 32 tackles, a sack, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 quarterback hurries. He also leads all defensive linemen with a 9.5% run stop percentage this season, according to ESPN research. So, yeah. a lot of people are excited about this. They're excited about the production. They're excited about what it could mean for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to say this. I'm not convinced that this means that we should all of a sudden be hopeful for the Cowboys to make the playoffs. But here's something I said yesterday. Yesterday in my stream, I was like, in order for the Cowboys to make the playoffs at this point, they would need like a Mighty Ducks level transformation. And what I mean by that is, like, if you watch the old Disney Mighty Ducks movies, like, the team always started off like trash in the beginning, but then they would do two things to become a championship team by the end of the movie. One was they would acquire some crazy good player. And the other thing is that they would have a ridiculous montage. And I was like, so yeah, they're going to have like a Mighty Ducks level montage during the bye week and make a good trade in order for this to happen. So this acquisition of Quinnen Williams, I mean, that's the acquisition of the good player. So can they actually do the equivalent of a Mighty Ducks level montage during the bye week? Maybe they can. If any team could pull it off, it would be the Dallas Cowboys. And I kind of hate it because I hate the idea of reinforcing Jerry Jones's bad behavior. But I would rather see this team make a playoff run this season despite everything that's happened and actually make use of some of Dak Prescott's and CeeDee Lamb's good years and actually give George Pickens incentive to want to come back to this team. I would rather that happen than have the team keep going down this terrible cliff that they're going down just for the sake of teaching Jerry Jones a lesson. So, JV, I see you in the chat. Thanks for showing up. I'm sorry that you didn't get a notification. I don't know why you didn't. Leon, good to see you in the chat. Thanks for joining us. Leon says, we brought in some reinforcements. I hope we can turn this thing around. Exactly. At the end of the day, that's the name of the game. So, I'm hoping this means at least some better football to watch because, like, what we saw last night, I definitely don't want to deal with 8 more weeks of that. 8 more weeks of that. Definitely don't want to deal with that. So if nothing else, it should at least give us something better to talk about moving forward. So tomorrow night, we're going to talk a little bit more about these trades and what they mean for the team. I'm going to listen to Brian Schottenheimer's press conference and see what he says. I'm also going to see if he says anything about anything that could be considered a response to my burn book entry for today. So not saying that he would respond specifically to my burn book. He's probably not watching that segment, but just some of the things that I criticize him for. I'm wondering if he took the night to think about it and now has an answer. But anyway, that's the music. Came a little bit earlier than I expected. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Make sure those notifications are turned on and hopefully they work. And I'll see y'all next time. This has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and I'm out.
Won't you fall for me? Maybe marry me. Won't you sit beside me in the street tonight? We can talk all night. Good God, these stars are bright. Your face, it's a beautiful sight. Can't you see?